So, good morning again. We'll continue the discussion. So, yesterday I concluded by making some references to the Gayatri Mantra. And now, one very unique feature of Vedic culture and Vedic literature is it is called in Sanskrit by a technical word, apaurushayatva, which means it is not written or recorded by a single author. And that's a very interesting thing. In fact, that's why Vedic culture or Vedic way of life is totally free from any kind of fanaticism. One single individual revealing to another single individual a great truth, which the later one is expected to propagate and spread among the people, and all recorded in a single book, which exhausts the whole wisdom of God, where you cannot change one comma, one full stop, one sentence, or one word, or interpret in a different way. This you don't find in Vedic tradition. So one may conclude it is some kind of a spiritual anarchy. Put it that way. But it is this freedom that produced in India so many saints and sages. And for thousands of years. And not only that, the mechanism of this apaurushayatva means it's difficult to translate that into a single word in any language. The meaning is this: it is not necessarily dependent upon a single individual as a prophet or a single monotheistic almighty creator God or a messenger or a book or a particular kind of rituals or practices. So if you go to India, you find every village has its temple, and every temple is deity. Now, in the Vedic literature, you find four or five levels of evolution in the idea of Godhead. Now, I must mention to you, this is not the received interpretation. This interpretation is a great contribution of modern European Indologists who happened to study Vedic literature right from the beginnings of 18th century and continued all the way to our own times. Now, Max Muller is credited with having made this contribution. That is, there are 5 levels of evolution in the idea of Godhead: pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, monotheism, henotheism, and monism. So you may make it, sometimes they make it 6. That's a very interesting thing. So first stage in the evolution of God is pantheism. Now what is pantheism? Well, Wordsworth was a pantheist, so also was Emerson, supposedly. You equate nature with God. The grandeur, the beauty, the sublimity, the vast expanse of the skies, the height of the mountains, or all these resemble or may remind you of something that is infinite in power, in grandeur, in sublimity, in beauty. So that's the first stage of in the evolution of God, of Godhead. The second stage is pantheism, where maybe Shinto religion in Japan is one example, where you just do not equate nature with God, but you conceive of a inherent inner spirit, inherent as immanent in the natural phenomena. In some respects, the Native American religion, some of them may have something to do with this, though I am not an authority on the subject. The third stage is polytheism, where they thought, this is again Max Muller's view. So it was Max Muller who studied this from modern perspective. Remember, this is not accepted by traditional Vedic Pandits of India. They will laugh at the whole thing. So, but I tell you, the contribution of modern Indo-European or European Indologists do have a great relevance, because that gives you a different perspective, a different outlook. And that is a great contribution to the study of Vedic sociology, Vedic anthropology, and Vedic metaphysics, and so on. So they have made a great contribution. Those who have studied traditionally and also had modern access to European thought, European methodology of analysis, do agree with this. Third stage polytheism, where behind every natural phenomenon there is a god or goddess. Polytheism. Monotheism is the next stage, fourth stage. There will be 6 stages in fact. Monotheism implies one almighty creator God who presides over the whole entire pantheon of Godheads. One. So now something very interesting. If you read the 1081 suktas of Rigveda Samhita, which contains nearly 11,000 slokas, verses, you find many of these long poems called hymns, they begin with polytheistic ideas, and finally they end with monotheistic ideas, sometimes even monistic ideas. I will tell you what monism implies in Vedic terminology. So sometimes in many of these hymns there is polytheism, and also in every sukta, Varuna Sukta or Indra Sukta, for example, looks upon Indra as the mighty, almighty, presiding deity of all other gods and goddesses. Saraswati Sukta, which again I'm going to maybe going to explain to you, is another example, where Saraswati as the embodiment of Jnana Shakti, Ichcha Shakti, Kriya Shakti is explained. Well, I shall explain that to give an example of this phenomenon. In each sukta, the particular god or goddess is supposed to be the greatest. For example, there is one Saraswati Sukta. Now, it comes in the Rigveda Samhita, first mandala. Now, Saraswati is the name of a river. Imam me Gange, Jamani, Saraswati, Purushniya. In fact, this gives a list of 10 rivers, 7 main rivers, and 3 auxiliary rivers. Sapta Nadya, Pradhana Nadya, Sapta, Avaya Nadya, Stisra. There is Hayana's commentary says 3 auxiliaries and 7 main rivers. Like Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, huge river systems. Now, the same Saraswati is later promoted to the status of the goddess who resides in the heart of the faithful, in the heart of those who chant this hymn with a sense of sanctity and devotion as faithful. Now, well, how this works psychologically? Suppose you chant a hymn, you understand the meaning of the hymn and of this verse. The meaning is this: O Goddess, please reside in my heart as the supreme wisdom. You are the embodiment of will, action, and knowledge. Ichcha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti is called will, action, and knowledge. Please give me the wisdom to make proper use of all my powers, intellectual, mental, spiritual powers. If you know this mantra correctly, and if you know the meaning, and if you chant it every day, you cannot end up being a fool or an idiot. You become a wise person. Now, manana trayate iti mantra. This is the definition of a mantra. What is mantra? Mantra is a sacred word symbol. When you chanted mantra with great concentration, with great focus and sincere belief, and then when you go deeper and deeper, you chant it, that mantra becomes a potent force. One can even experiment in a laboratory. A perverted example. Suppose a person goes on saying that he is ignorant, you see. He will end up being an ignorant person. Because that is the whole, in psychological counseling, your management experts paying $500 per session for repeating, I shall succeed, 100 times. CEOs, they do that. They pay $500, so they want that to work really. So they may try work hard. Sincerely they will do, I shall succeed. So a marketing executive whose performance falls below the expected level goes to Las Vegas, pay $500 per session, and the only thing he has to do is repeat 1,000 times, 100 times, I shall succeed. And he comes out and his performance radically improves. Actually, this is a kind of word suggestion. Such word has an effect on you. Suppose now I shall succeed is not a very potent mantra by any stretch of imagination. But when, see, for example, is a mantra. Pavakana Saraswati Vaje Vajanivati Yakyam Vastu Dhiya Vasuhu. This is a one simple mantra from Saraswati. Pavakana Saraswati. Pavaka means bestowing purity. Vajebhir Vajanivati. You are endowed with these divine attributes and qualities. Dhiyavasu. You are rich, potent in holy thoughts. Saraswati. So, Sara could mean water. Sara could mean knowledge, essence, wisdom. So the embodiment of wisdom. Yajnam vastu dhiya vasu. Now, please be contented with my prayer offering. If you know the meaning of this so-called Saraswati, please reside in me. You are requesting, pleading wisdom to reside in you. So that mantra, when recited by, let us say, 6,000 years, 7,000 years, by great sages sitting in the Himalayan mountains with long beard, deep in meditation, and not shouting loudly, slowly they begin by reciting, then slowly they reach a point where they identify themselves with the essence of what the sacred mantra. Then that word symbol becomes a potent power. After 6,000 years, when you recite it, the accumulated potency, divine potency of that mantra will be transmitted to you. That's how mantra becomes a potent power. So mantra, I shall succeed, it was in a very superficial, almost ridiculous manner. But a sacred mantra recited by great sages for 6,000, 7,000 years and contemplated upon, meditated upon, it becomes a mantra. That is Manana Trayate iti mantra. So this divine word, when you first recite, you may recite loudly. That is the grossest dimension of recitation of any mantra. Then becomes verbal, it goes deeper, then it becomes mental, then you contemplate on the meaning, then you become identified with that. It is called the Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari, 4 levels. Vaikhari is the lowest. See, when you recite a hymn in any tradition, religious tradition, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever it is, when you recite a shout loudly, its power is there very limited. When you recite it mentally, it's more. When you do it silently, when it becomes a natural inner spiritual journey, it becomes more potent. So that's how a sacred word symbol becomes a vehicle for us to undertake the spiritual journey. That's why, for example, the word pavaka it means something that purifies. So pavanam kadoti means that purifies, cleans. So Goddess Saraswati, you are the embodiment of action, pure action with wisdom, knowledge and bliss. So please reside in me. Now, what I mean to say, I mentioned earlier, in each of these suktas, Vedic suktas, Saraswati suktas, Indra sukta, Varuna sukta, Pavamana sukta, and so on, you find, though at the beginning you may find pantheistic or pantheistic dimensions, it ended with praying to that god or goddess as the supreme divine reality. Residing in you. Residing in you means that doesn't have a form. It cannot be limited by a structure. It is divine reality, divine spark, divine principle. So from pantheistic to monistic ideas you find in each of the suttas. That's why pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, monotheism, henotheism. Henotheism is what I mentioned, in every sutta it becomes prominent by itself. And monism, where you pray to the divine reality not as a anthropomorphic structure with forms and names and attributes, but as a divine spark, divine reality, inherent or residing within our hearts. So this is how mantra actually works. Now, as I mentioned, these mantras were not written by a single individual. Let's call it apaurushayatvam. So the magic of total freedom from fanaticism in Vedic literature is this. They don't say this wisdom came from a single individual. They don't say this wisdom is put in a book and every comma is coming from that, or that man sitting above the clouds who won't take no for an answer. That's what it implies, really speaking. Now, very often, I know I shall come to this Gayatri mantra. Gayatri mantra is special because it is supposed to be, as I mentioned yesterday, it is the essence of the entire Vedic suttas. There are certain conventional orthodox views. Well, I'm referring to them maybe of sociological interest, because these views were formed in ancient times when the whole wisdom was imparted through oral tradition. So you find this the mantra should not be written and read. So if Giti, Sigri, Chirakambi, Tata, Likhita Pathaka, Anarthasya, Atmakandasya, Shadedi, Pathagatamaha. So you should not utter mantras with too much of a musical manner, shaking your head or making a big gesture. It should be done with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. So all these rules were laid down. Now coming to Gayatri. Now, Gayatri is a name given to that divine reality when that divine reality is meditated in the morning. So the same reality, which actually Gayatri, manifests as Gayatri, Savitri and Saraswati. These are three synonyms, but it is Gayatri alone. When this Gayatri recited facing the east in the morning, when you invoke the presence of that divine reality, it is called Gayatri. And when the same Gayatri was meditated upon, in the midday, it used to be called Savitri, and the same Gayatri, when meditated upon, ending with a request of Mother, now you go back to your divine abode, it used to be called Saraswati. So frequently those of you who read this text may come across these three terms implying the same thing. Saraswati also was a name given to Gayatri. So, in a way, what does Gayatri imply? Well, I can put in a simple word. It is nothing but the divine feminine archetype, or the ultimate spiritual reality conceived as a divine feminine archetype, who is the bestower of wisdom and knowledge, sustenance, and the ability to act and the ability to decide. That's why will, icha. In the Sanskrit words you find icha, will, decision. You decide to do certain things. Kriya means action. You need energy. But before you decide to act, you should know what to act upon, how to act, how to do. So for that you need will, and action and will should be guided by knowledge and wisdom. So it is called jnana. So icha shakti, jnana shakti, kriya shakti. These three dimensions you find. So the same divine archetype conceived as the bestower of the sustenance and knowledge for human life was conceived as Gayatri. 24 syllables is a metrical form. And that Gayatri mantra used to be recited by students of Vedas in the morning and the evening, mandatory, but more Orthodox people who have a lot of time maybe to spare used to do in the midday also. But that is the traditional way, both 3 times in Madhyandina. So I shall try to explain this now. Now the mantra is this one. Om Bhur Bhuvaswa, Om Maha, Om Jana, Om Taba, Om Satyam. This particular portion, these 3 portions is to be called Mahavyakriti. It's a different, a different section. The Om Bhu Bhuva Suha, etc. Om Tatsa Vidurvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. This is the mantra. Now, you find here 7 aspects explained. Bhur, Bhuva, Swa, Maha, Jana, Tapa, Satyam. So what are they? I shall try to explain. Om is a sacred word symbol which is chanted at the beginning of every auspicious act or before recitation of every auspicious mantra. So, Om earth, sky and heaven, or middle region, or place of birth, or mansion of the blessed, or abode of truth, may we meditate on the adorable light or effulgence of that divine generate, the divine reality, which is the totality of all that exists and all that manifests as knowledge, and the totality of all blissfulness. And I meditate upon that reality, Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat, because that meditation or that reality whom I meditate upon quickens or energizes my own consciousness, my own knowledge. This is the essence of the mantra. Now, this much about it. Now, when we talk about Vedic way of life, there is something very interesting. There are two ways of interacting with Gayatri. One, in the morning, the ancient Vedic sages used to take bath in a river, preferably in a river, and used to face the east and do a prayer. The prayer used to be called Gayatri Avahana Mantra. It is a mantra, as I mentioned, this sacred, divine, potent word which is full of power. So we have to remember one important thing, and this is very important to remember. See, a sacred mantra considered to be sacred by sages, ascetics, spiritual seekers for thousands of years, and read and contemplated upon and meditated upon by them for thousands of years. That sacred word symbol becomes potent with divine energy. That's how a word becomes a mantra. A word may not save you, but mananat trayate iti mantra. The definition is mantra saves you, mantra energizes you. A divine word gives you wisdom when you contemplate upon the meaning of that mantra. That is the real definition. Manana trayate iti mantra. Not hearing may also help us to contemplate on, but contemplating in silence makes that word potent with the divine energy. So that is the whole secret of mantra. That is true. Well, I won't give far, but I can give an example. The one striking example that I have come across from Christian tradition is from the Russian Orthodox tradition, which I quote a number of times elaborately in these sessions, in the talks here in San Francisco. See, the way of pilgrim, you find, when the pilgrim learned the Jesus prayer from a monk, from a Russian Orthodox monk, who took him into his cell and taught him, when he mastered it, how to remain in a state of perpetual prayerfulness, is based on St. Paul's first epistle, where St. Paul refers to the spontaneous Jesus prayer. When a humble pilgrim who had not much education, a Russian peasant in the middle of 19th century, it comes as autobiographical writing. It is not myth, it is not a story from the Old Testament, nothing like that. It is something that happened in the 19th century, and the autobiography was found in Mount Ethos, which later translated into different word languages. So this humble Russian peasant in the Way of a Pilgrim mastered the Jesus prayer from an Orthodox monk who took him to his tiny cell and made him learn it. When he actually learned it, he had a wonderful experience which is narrated in 2-3 paragraphs in that book, some French translation of the Way of a Pilgrim. Now, this man knew that mantra. He had read it. He used to go on writing. He was not a well-educated man. We could just have managed to write. He knew it. But when he learned from his teacher, then it produced a great effect. And that he became a mystic. So when you get a mantra, a word symbol, from a person who has practiced it and realized its potency, it is not that you get a word from another person, you also get something along with that. The potency is also transmitted, depending upon the spiritual fitness or mental fitness of the seeker who receives it. That's how Gayatri Mantra became a tool for every individual to evolve from dharma through artha and kama towards moksha. Yesterday I explained this. You have to relate this in the context of what I explained yesterday. The whole evolution from dharma towards moksha, from ethical principle to spiritual liberation, through the path of empirical duties and responsibilities and fulfillments of desires and everything, Gayatri Mantra became a tool, a guide, and a vehicle. So, in order to internalize this mantra, normally students used to be taught to invoke the presence of Gayatri. It is called Gayatri Avahana Mantra. It is something like this. Ayatu Varada Devi Aksharam Brahma Samvidam Gayatri Chandasa Madedam Brahma Jushaswami, etc. Ojosi Sahosi Belamasi Bhrajosi Devanam Dhamanamasi Vishwamasi Vishwayu Sarvamasi, etc. So I won't go because we don't have time to go through the whole thing. So the point is, may this Gayatri, Mother, who bestows all boons to those who seek, who is eternal, who is to be known through the Vedas. It's called Veda Mata, it is called. The mother of the Vedas, the essence of the Vedas, appear here and now and accept this hymn of Vedic praise. This is chant in the morning. It's called Gayatri. Ayatu Varada Devi, Varada, the one who gives. See, Varam Dadaditi, Varam means what you are seeking for, what you are pleading for through the sacred prayer. You are the vital force, the power of the sense organs, and you are the one who gives us light, health, knowledge, everything. So this is how they used to recite. So when this prayer is done with sincerity, with the spiritual fitness, then our mind also gets affected by the divine potency that this sacred word symbol produces. And this is in direct proportion with the sense of sanctity, sacredness, and honesty, pure integrity, sincerity with which we chant these mantras. That is true everywhere. Even musicians, when your music teacher is teaching you music, if you listen to the music with a great sense of sanctity, you also love music, then there is every chance that you may end up being a great musician. But there are people who, they may listen, all right, he says something, okay. That person will never become a musician. In fact, that's why in the Lord Krishna, of all persons, who was certainly the embodiment of compassion, he makes a very interesting statement at the end of the Gita. Now he says, Idante na tapaskaya na bhaktaya gadachana na cha asrushave vakyam na yomam abhyasuyati. Lord Krishna, who was so compassionate towards Arjuna, his student, and who had all compassion, all forgiveness, etc. And finally he says, don't teach this to whom? A person who has no devotion and who has not taken the pains to become fit to learn this, the teachings of the Gita. And the person who is jealous of his own teacher. If suppose you are a university professor, you are teaching, and suddenly you overhear some of the wonderful compliments from your own students. Because we get paycheck, so we don't worry much about it. But suppose you are imparting this education in a gurukula, where you don't ask for payment. You consider teaching this a sacred duty to your teacher who has taught you. So in order to pay back the debt to your teacher, you are imparting this wisdom to your students as a sacred responsibility. Not in ancient Vedic ages, no teacher ever received any payment. And they used to make all arrangements for feeding their students. And no student ever paid the tuition fees. So in such a situation, you have to remember the word, this instruction from Lord Krishna comes in the Mahabharata. 3026 BC is the year mentioned, the year of Mahabharata war. So he says, don't teach this to somebody who has no devotion, no integrity, and who may not have respect for his own, the one who teaches. So that's an interesting thing. So this is Lord Bhagavad Gita says. So actually, much of the effect of what we learn has something to do with the reverence and respect that we have for the subject we learned, and for the teacher from whom we learn the subject. You can easily imagine, suppose your own children who are not interested in music or painting, you force them to learn music. They will become enemies of music and become enemies of musicians also, most likely. Unless they respect the subject they learn, and that respect is extended to the teacher who teaches the subject, then only the subject is, that particular vidya, branch of learning, will flourish. That's why Lord Krishna says. Now, in the evening, they used to chant the same, pray to the same Gayatri as Saraswati. So, Uttame Shikhare Devi Bhumyam Parvadamurdhani Brahmane Bhyo Bhyanujñāta Gaccha Devi Yatha Sukham. So here in the evening, the same person who recites Gayatri, He Devi Gayatri Tud Upasakebhyaga Brahmanebhyaga Anujñānam Abhivyapya Athava Taihi Anujñāta Sadi Punarabi Tesham Samipam Agantum Pradikshamana Yatha Sukham Yatra Gatayaha Bhavatyaga Sukham Bhavati He Devi Tatra Uttame Punyatame Sikhare Mahamero Bhumo Anyatra Parvadamurdhani Uchrita Pradeshe Va Gaccha Gatva Tatra Tishtha. And this is a commentary I read, don't worry, I will translate it. What it means is, oh mother, this morning you came and blessed me, made my day wonderful, gave me wisdom. Now, this is evening, the sunset, turning to the west. The ancient sages used to plead to this mother, oh goddess, now please go and remain at thy high abode, Uttame Shikhare. So this Saraswati was imagined to be, conceived to be residing on the high mountains, the heights and the abode in the celestial regions, holiest peak of the earth in that sense, Uttame Shikhare Devi, or in any high place until your spiritual seekers will call you back tomorrow morning at sunrise. Now, it was this process of spiritual practices that will help a person to evolve from just a living being to a wise human being, so to speak. So, surprisingly, you find the Vedic lawgivers use some kind of uncompromised language, more like John the Baptist language was totally different from the language of Jesus Christ, John Baptist did not mince words. The vipers, snakes, these are the wonderful terms he used. So you find a few such words in the writings of the lawgivers like Manu, Parashara, etc. So they used to say every human being is not different from animals unless that person is formally introduced, or we may call it initiated, to this Gayatri mantra, because it is Gayatri mantra that takes a person towards higher evolution. Otherwise, so long as a human being is satisfied with food, shelter, all these things, they are not very different from the animal kingdom. You need not listen to these great statements, but by contrast I'm mentioning, you find statements like in the Smriti literature. Now, this Gayatri mantra, incidentally, had a great role in the evolution of Sanskrit prosody. So you find a meter associated with the Vyakritis Gayatri, Ushnik, Anushtup, Brihadi, Pankti, Trishtup and Jagadi. Okay, I am not going to those details. The Gayatri mantra actually played a very, very important role in the evolution of Sanskrit prosody and Sanskrit poetics, not only Vedic philosophy. Now, I want to, let me see, just a few more minutes, perhaps 15 minutes I must stop. Now, I want to say a few things about how life or teaching or interaction between sages and their students used to take place in ancient India. There are a few things I want to mention. So if you read the Vedic literature in English prose, you come across many stories. These stories, when we read as stories, we may not be able to fully understand the implications. Many of the interpretations have been carried on, transmitted by generations of teachers and students for the last thousands of years. So I'm going to give you an example. In ancient times, people who were rich and affluent considered it their duty to make contribution to Vedic hermitages, where the sages stayed and taught their students, and students were given free education. Sages also didn't have any source of income. I'm just narrating such an incident. So in the Mundaka Upanishad, you come across a very interesting story. There was a great sage called, his name was Angira. And there was a big rich man, his name was Shaunaka. Okay, now, I can give, even now today, if you go to Himalayan regions, if you travel, you're walking as a pilgrim to Badrinath or Kedarnath, and if you buy a tea or coffee from a shop, they will not charge you. And there are places where they give you blankets. They may have, if they find that you are a pilgrim going, if you're in need, everything is free. And this is made possible because of the philanthropy of great rich, affluent persons. The tradition still continues. Now we are actually dealing with such a situation here. There was once upon a time a great philanthropist who used to assist, who used to help sages. So his name was Shaunaka. So he was called Mahashala. You know, Shala means a big tent, a hall, which they used to construct for feeding pilgrims, hundreds, maybe thousands of people. If you go to Kumbh Mela, where 50 million people gather, sometimes 80 million people gather. Everything is free, and is made by this being actually. If you find the many Indian communities, feeding free food for World Parliament of Religions, you find 5 days. You can find it's a continuation of the ancient tradition, giving food to those who are somehow connected or related to spiritual pursuit. So this Mahashala, this Shaunaka, rich man, he had a name called Mahashala because he used to construct huge tents and inns for feeding pilgrims. So Shaunako kavai Mahashalo angirasam vidhivat upasanna papracha kasminnu bhagavo vijñāde sarvam vidam vijñādam bhavatiti. So these philanthropists once a while used to go to hermitages, approach the saints and sages and ask spiritual questions. And once a rich man came to a great sage with the name Angira, Kasminnu Bhagavo Vijñāde Sarvam Vidam Vijñādam Bhavaditi. This is the beginning of one of these Upanishads. By knowing what, one becomes well informed, knowledgeable of everything. What is that knowledge that makes you knowledgeable about everything, that gives you the knowledge of everything? What is the essence of all knowledge? What is the essence of all knowledge, all learning? This is a question. So in answer to this, the sage gives an answer. Tasmai sakho vaja dve vidye vedide ve itika smayat brahmavido vadandi parachaiva paracha. This is, I'm just saying one mantra, that's all. He says, There are two types of learning in this world. One, the supreme knowledge, that is spiritual knowledge. That is the knowledge of all knowledges. That is the essence of all learning. Sarvavidya Pratishta, the foundation of all knowledge, all learning. Then there are other knowledges, learnings, branches, the different Vedas, different sciences, different skills, astrology, astronomy, mathematics, all these are mentioned in the list, and all the 4 Vedas. So all these book learning and also the spiritual learning. But of course, when you read a book that tells you about spiritual realization, that knowledge also could be considered to be supreme in the relative sense. So, I'm just giving this example. So, this knowledge of spiritual tradition was transmitted by sages, not only by imparting education to children who came to the hermitages, but also to people who came to these sages asking for spiritual wisdom. Here, you can find this happening. People who have done a lot of good actions in their life, practice a lot of unselfishness, broad-mindedness, charity, they will gradually evolve to a higher level of spirituality. I don't mean to say they become spiritually enlightened or anything, but there is an evolution taking place in our mental system. You find people who have made a lot of money, industry, through industrial or commercial undertakings, endeavors. So they start a foundation or a trust to help people suffering from different epidemics, and also they also promote and they also finance religious activities, charitable activities, philanthropical activities which a businessman may not directly undertake because he will look for profit. But the same businessman, when he sticks to certain principles, certain dharma, as you mentioned, certain ethical values, they will reach a slightly higher level of evolution. They will feel a kind of aversion or detachment towards the very wealth that they may have. They may not throw away everything, what I mean, or renounce, not at all. But their perspective changes. They show a higher regard for the concerned welfare of other people. This is an interesting incident, Mahashala. So this Saunaka was just a rich man, philanthropical person, who used to spend a lot of money for feeding pilgrims by constructing tents and inns for feeding pilgrims, the spiritual seekers. One day that man approached, himself asked a question which eventually leads him to the highest spiritual realization. The many wonderful stories you find in the Vedic literature. Tattwamayananda is another example, where a small little boy is the spiritual seeker, the student, and the teacher is Yama. One day, a little boy found his father was performing an elaborate Vedic ritual, which involves a huge expenditure, distribution of wealth and money among the people. And he was supposed to donate healthy, useful cows, because cows used to be an important currency, useful animal. It gives food and yogurt and things like that, which food and milk was used in Vedic sacrifices. So one day the little boy watched, and his father was distributing all the old battered cows which cannot yield any more milk and which cannot eat any more grass. That's the literal translation. The description of the kind of cows this old man was distributing, and that's what he wanted, to fame as a great philanthropist. And the child wanted to expose his own father. So he directly didn't do that, but he went and asked a question. Kasmai mam dasyasiti. The child went to his father, asked him, to whom are you going to give me? There is a reason for it, A person was supposed to donate, make a gift of what is most valuable to him and not something that is of no use to him. So according to old tradition, a son was the most valuable wealth of a father. The child was actually using a technique to bring a sense of righteousness to his father's mind. So father got angry. He thought he was making fun of him. The child repeated the question. The father told him, I am going to gift of you to the Lord of Death. Now the child says, well, my father. It's a mythological story, but mythological story has a great message. It's one of the greatest Upanishads. Tidy Upanishad, Swami Vivekananda was a great admirer of this Upanishad. And the child wanted to make his father's words come true. Otherwise, father will be termed as a liar. So he went to Yama's abode, and Yama was not there. Yama returned on the third day. So for 3 days that he waited, Yama gave a compensation. You can ask 3 boons. So Nachiketa asked for 3 boons. First he asked, well, when I go back to my home, father should not scold me. Okay, that boon was given. The second boon was, after death, I should be able to go to heaven. That also was given. Heaven in the Vedantic tradition, please remember, is different from heaven as understood in Christian tradition. Heaven in Vedantic tradition doesn't have a spiritual connection. And that's an important point to remember. Heaven is just a place for enjoying the merits of all your good actions in this world. And it is not everlasting. After you have exhausted the merit of all your good actions, you will come back to this world. So heaven doesn't have a spiritual connection in Vedic tradition, culture. That should be understood. So the Yama told him, already you go to heaven, no problem. The third boon that he asked was, please teach me the highest spiritual truth. Yama was not willing to give, tested him, finally he gave him. He taught him, and Nachiketa became a great jnani, a great knower of Brahman, a great spiritually enlightened person. So you find many such dialogues, several dialogues. The dialogues in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad speaks about vast assemblies of pandits, scholars, philosophers. He used to assemble in king's courts and argue about metaphysical, spiritual topics. You find? Well, those of you who have read the works of Megasthenes, English translation is available, you find Megasthenes was the Greek ambassador to India in 305 BC. He was Greek ambassador to Chandragupta Maurya's court. So Megasthenes has written elaborately about some of these ancient practices. Of course, Megasthenes came at a time when the later Vedic period was slowly approaching. It had already come to an end, but still it not the Vedic age that we are talking about. Later Vedic age was coming to an end in 3rd century, 4th century BC. So Megasthenes' book can give an idea of these debates, sages, and discussions taking place. He wrote in Greek, and he came about 20 years after Alexander's Alexander came to the northwestern frontier of India. It's one of the natural consequences of Alexander's interaction with India. So now this is the last session, so you can have interaction. Most welcome. Okay.
Swami, what is the relationship of japa, prana to mantra?
Oh yeah. Gayatri mantra is frequently, some of the Gayatri, in some traditions, Gayatri mantra is uttered to the accompaniment of pranayama. So the japa and pranayama goes together. When in certain traditions, when you hold your breath within, you are supposed to recite some mantras. But one should not try to practice this it could be counterproductive unless you have got the proper conditions and training of a teacher. So japa, it means recitation with great sense of sanctity. Prana is, the energy. Energy is air, the breathing air is the gross manifestation of that energy. So often, they practice japa doing antakumbha. Antakumbha means retaining the breath within. That's what it is. There's some connection. That when you hold the breath within, your attention, your concentration increases. But it increases the potency, but there is always possibility of risk unless it is done under the direction of a teacher.
Swami, I have a question about the mantra. So you're talking about the Gayatri mantra, which is thousands of years old. And when we're initiated, we get a mantra from, a Swami that, I don't know, does it go back thousands of years or it comes?
That you can ask me some other time.
Okay.
That we don't discuss. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll discuss. Some other, you can ask for an appointment, we'll discuss. Okay? Right. Okay. Please. We don't discuss that.
Thank you, Swamiji. When I left yesterday, I was wondering, when you said in the early Vedantic times that God wasn't worshipped. I don't know if I'm being a bad student or not. So does that mean, I don't know if early Vedantic times preceded the pantheistic era.
It's actually, this analysis is only a very academic analysis of the evolution of Godhead given by Max Muller. It is of relevance only from the standpoint of comparative study. From a spiritual philosophical point of view, it has no relevance because the Rig Veda has got 10 mandalas and 1080 suktas, so nearly 11,000 ruks or mantras. So you find in every sukta means a hymn, a number of verses together called hymn. Each of these hymns will have pantheistic, monistic, polytheistic, and also monotheistic ideas. So this was an analysis that he made. I made a reference to this, not to consider this as something very authentic. Well, it is authentic for an academic, no doubt. Because when you study the Vedic literature, the way we study Homer's Iliad or DC, Aristotle's works, that's one approach. But Vedas are not studied that way. Vedas, especially its mantras, are considered to be sacred, so they belong to different class from the standpoint of a spiritual seeker. From a purely academic point of view, Max Muller's analysis may be of some value. It has its relevance, but in a way it is not accepted by traditional scholars for the single reason. In every sutta, most of every suttas you find all pantheistic, monistic and monotheistic ideas. But then that analysis is certainly very valid, relevant for somebody to want to study the sociology or the evolution of Godhead, the metaphysics of Vedic philosophy. So that's a different thing. So Vedas are studied not only as a sacred text, but also studied for understanding the sociology, anthropology, the customs and habits of ancient Aryans, the way they looked upon rivers and mountains and valleys. So Vedas also give you a glimpse into the sociology, the social customs and habits of those days, of the early Aryan race. So that's why it is very important. But when we study these as mantras, for example, we are looking about the whole thing from a spiritual perspective, as something sacred. That's interesting.
So, in the early Vedantic time, was there a sense of God, or was it more just experiencing and chanting? Was it more?
Yeah, they used to memorize these things. They used to memorize. You know, the entire Vedic literature was not exclusively spiritual. There are many social customs, habits, very often giving a picture of the ancient Aryan nomadic life, all that you find. So you find a lot of such things. But essentially there is a spiritual culture, a very profound spiritual culture that it reflects. That's what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
Hari Om Swamiji. How do you relate Vedic teachings with the later Puranas like Ramayana and Mahabharata?
Yeah. I want to tell you, according to, of course, I want to give you the traditional views of Hindu, the authority, including Dr. Adhakshan, Vivekananda, Ravindranath and others. So, there are a number of important guidelines in the Smriti literature. Smriti means is law, books of law, more or less constitution. I yesterday mentioned today's Indian constitution, modern times, has adopted many things from ancient Vedic Smritis, constitution. So, whenever there is a conflict between something, it may be a philosophical idea, or a custom, or a practice mentioned in the Vedas on the one hand, and Puranas or Smritis on the other hand, you totally reject the views of the Puranas and uphold the views of the Vedas. It is a very important thing. So the whole canonical literature of Hindu Dharma can be divided into three categories: Shruti, Smriti and Purana. Shruti means Vedas. Purana, mythology, mostly mythology, but there are great philosophical ideas. Bhagavata Purana is very profound. And also Smritis. So, Shruti Smriti Purananam Virodha Yatra Dursyate Tatra Sraudam Pramanam Syat Ayodvaite Smritirvara. Is a one verse in the Vyasa Smriti which says, if there is a conflict between something mentioned in the Vedas and something the same thing mentioned a different way in the Puranas or Smritis, you don't listen to Smritis and Puranas and listen to the Veda. Who says this? The author of the Vedas. The author of the Puranas, Vyasa. The author of Puranas said, don't listen to me if what I say is in conflict with the Vedas. That's why I often say, many of India's sociological problems like casteism, these huge pyramidal structure, the vertical and horizontal barriers of casteism and divisiveness, they all crept into Hindu society during the Puranic and Smriti period, not during the Vedas. During the Vedic times, society was highly flexible. In the same family, a person who is taking to contemplative life can be called a Brahmana, another person who is a soldier can be Kshatriya, taking to other trade and business Vaishya and Shudra and so on. But this became an inflexible, a rigid structure during the Puranic times. Very often, what happens, people who wanted to monopolize the privileges, they started interpreting all these as something based on birth and not based on temperament or qualities or actions. Originally, in the Vedic tradition, it was based on qualities, temperaments, and actions. So, Puranas are only attempt to explain the teachings of the Vedas or Upanishads for the common people. Vyasa himself says, so he uses the word manda buddhi, but those who are slow to understand as a literal meaning. So, great philosophical truths may not be quickly understood or appreciated by people who may not be spiritually evolved enough to understand it. So for them, you need a story. You give a long story and put something in that. Very often people end up taking the story, leaving out the message behind it. So, and actually modern thinkers like Vivekananda had criticized Hindu society for giving more importance to Puranas and mythological stories instead of giving attaching paramount importance to Vedas. They started giving too much importance to Puranas and Smritis. So Puranas and Smritis are of secondary importance. So this verse which I quoted tells you, Sruti Smriti Purananam Virodho Yatra Dursyade Tatra Sraudam Pramanam Syat Toyodvaithe Smriti Vara. It is in Vyasa Smriti. Many other mantras are there. Sruti Puraneshu Srudireva Giri Yesi Avirodhe Tu Sada Karyam Smatam Vaidhi. So I can quote many things. No time, no need also. The point is, Vyasa who wrote the Puranas and Vyasa who wrote the Vyasa Smriti which I am quoting now says, don't listen to Puranas or my own Puranas which I wrote. If I contradict, if I am in conflict with the views of the Vedas. But what happened, Hindu society, according to Vivekananda, started giving more importance to these bombastic Puranic stories and mythologies. So it is like standing on your head, Sishasana. That's what Swami Vivekananda said again and again. We had to bring back the ancient Vedantic Vedic culture, which is egalitarian and which is very dynamic culture, and which is, of course, in an ancient society which is so multipolar, so varied, and inhabiting a huge subcontinent of continental size, will naturally develop a lot of customs and habits which are mutually in conflict with each other. This happens.
What time in history was this?
Which one?
When did this happen? This kind of shift in...
Most probably it could be around 800, 700 BC onwards. Yeah. You have to count back, you have to count this way. Yeah. BC going forward means more ancient.
Swamiji, yesterday we were talking about the transition of life and death and so forth and one's thoughts. Mahatma Gandhi took the assassin's bullet,
Yeah.
and his last comment was, "Oh God." Would you make a comment about that?
And he didn't say, oh God, he said, hey Ram. He did, you can, of course, oh God can be a rough translation of it. You had nothing wrong in it. Your translation is totally wrong, but what he said was, hey Ram. And Ram was the deity, his understanding of the supreme spiritual reality that he used to chant and he used to meditate. In fact, his own father seems to have told him, Gandhi was always fearful, little child. So you take the name of Ram, God's name, you no fear. So he became fearless. So Gandhi must have practiced that from his early days. So it shows that when he was driving the British people crazy by organizing Indians, the Quit India movement, the Dante movement, and then the all this freedom struggle. Gandhi was such an astute diplomat and politician. He could outwit the smartest of British rulers, So he was such a gigantic person. So when he was doing all this, he was chanting the name of Ram. Otherwise, he would not be able to do that. So, he himself, he has written his teaching, his interpretation as being put in the form of by Mahadeva Desai called Anasakti Yoga. His commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So, he was a practitioner of this Nishkama Karma. I mean, doing everything without a selfish motive, with a sense of surrender to God, God's will, which he was practicing. So he was totally free from any kind of anxiety. That's what it shows. So, that's what it shows. In Bhagavata Purana, yesterday mentioned to you, by whatever means you can practice unselfishness in action, you can practice prayer or bhakti, devotion, you practice spiritual philosophy. Etavan Sangha Yoga Abhyam Swadharma Parinishthaya Janma Labha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Spudi. By whatever means, you should be able to leave this world with God's memory in your heart. That should be the supreme goal of human existence. You can find that's happened in Gandhi's life. And he was not a saint sitting somewhere in the mountains. And all the time he was agitating. As I mentioned, he was driving the British people crazy. In the midst of all that, he was if you read letters, he was a very astute man, very tenacious, and you find he was a very, very practical person. He was a trained lawyer after all. So he was the very opposite of the classical ascetic type, but he was an ascetic among politicians. He was a saint among politicians and politician among saints. Gandhi himself said he learned the ideal of patriotism by reading Vivekananda's complete works. Gandhi's testimony is Gandhiji drew inspiration from Swami Vivekananda by reading complete works. He was actually a disciple in political life, Gokhale. So Gokhale himself was a great idealist. So Swami Vivekananda was again the source of inspiration behind Gandhi, ultimately.
Swamiji, I feel like you have given us so much information, and that we have traveled great distances in the last couple of days. I wonder if there might be a couple of things that you would like us specifically to take with us that might actually change our lives going forward. Yeah. Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, one thing is, we will have to work hard. We will have to face challenges, but in the midst of all these, if we can keep in mind all these things are necessary, but they are not eternal. There is something higher. If you believe in God or spirituality, that is supreme. So, human life has got a much higher potential and possibility than success in life as we understand it normally. That success will become real success with capital letter S when it is linked to a higher ideal, transcendental ideal. That will help us to look at this world and our own life from a higher perspective. That's all. So now we will have
one more question?
Any question? Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So yesterday we were talking about life after death, and that there are a lot of Vedantic rituals that are performed to help that passage.
Yeah.
So are Christians at a disadvantage?
Excuse me? Excuse me?
So yesterday
You were the last word, last sentence.
are Christians at a disadvantage?
Oh, not at all. They are not a disadvantage. Because I will tell you, it's surprising. the early Christians who lived in India, Christian settlement in India begins with at least 2nd century AD. Though they claim St. Thomas, which is often disputed, but anyway, there is proof, there is evidence to show that there was a Christian presence in India and in southwestern part of India from 2nd century AD onwards. They used to believe in the law of karma and rebirth. It was the Portuguese who came in the 16th century who persecuted them for holding this belief. Before the Portuguese were driven away by the Hindu kings, Portuguese destroyed the churches of the early Christians and the synagogues of the Jews. So, and there are better authorities in this country, so I'm open to correction. I read and I listened to some of the authorities saying that the law of karma and rebirth used to be part of Christian faith till the Council of Nicaea in 320 AD, when Constantine arbitrarily imposed his own brand of Christianity, which had been different from the true Christianity that Jesus must have preached on Roman Empire. So that explains a lot. That's again, I don't normally look upon this. I don't want to impose these views on you, but there are people who believe. Of course, this is true. Law of karma and rebirth were put to vote in the Council of Nicaea, and Constantine was the all-powerful emperor. It was defeated. That was also the beginning of the division of the Eastern Western Roman Empire. Church. So anyway, there is evidence to believe that the early Greeks believed in law of karma and rebirth. Really speaking, from a spiritual perspective, we need not worry too much about it. But if you believe in this, you can explain a lot of things which may otherwise you may attribute to the devil or gods. No. So that's the thing. The alternate is devil is conspiring against you. Instead of that is your own unfortunate events that you did, and instead of if you could correct, everything will be okay. So how wonderful it is. Well, something is happening to us. It may be because I didn't do what I should have done. So from now onwards, I should do the right thing. So I can neutralize the negative effect of wrong actions. So actually there is a lot of scope for one's own improvement in fact. That's why Vedantic approach to the problem of evil is the doctrine of error and not doctrine of the devil or evil. What's your approach to the unpleasant side of human life and existence? Because of some mistakes or erroneous actions on our part, we happen to do certain things, and now by doing the right thing, I can neutralize the unpleasant effects of wrong actions in the past. This is a Vedantic approach. Of course, true prayer also has that effect. When you sincerely pray, that's also one way. So there is a bit of a theological problem which I don't want to go into the details of now.
Okay, thank you very much.
But the main thing is, Vedanta believes that any day, any moment we can start a new life. Nothing is lost and you are never late. That is Vedantic message. That's why Lord Krishna says. He says, and it's not an arbitrary statement. People may believe, there are people who take statements, but I can say, in the 6th chapter of Gita, Arjuna puts one question to Krishna. He says, and that's very interesting, related to the question you asked. He says, Ayadi Sadhayo Pedo Yoga Chalida Manasaha Aprapi Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Gatim Krishna Gechati. Suppose Krishna had taught him bhakti, jnana, devotion, knowledge, karma yoga, everything, the second chapter, which includes everything. And then Arjuna, his disciple, puts one question. Suppose I die, or I have a deviation. Suppose I am not able to implement all your instructions. People, you suppose a person who is sincerely striving to lead a spiritual life has a deviation, or may not succeed and dies out. Everything is gone? Lord Krishna says, no. Even the little bit of good actions you have done, good words you have spoken, good thoughts you have thought, prayer, one meditation, that will produce its own spiritual that will remain with you when you are born again. This will help you to strive again, to go forward again. Partha naiveha namutra vinasas tasya vidyate nahi kalyanagrit kaschid durgadim tata gecchati. Lord Krishna says, Arjuna, even if you have done a little bit of good action, you will not be lost. Good action doesn't mean with physical activity. A good thought, a good idea, a good will, if only I could help him, though I cannot. That is a freedom. That also will produce a spiritual capital. And you are born again with the spiritual capital, which is yours, your wealth. Tatradam buddhi samyogam labhade paurodekhigam yatadecha tato bhuya samsiddho kurunantana. The Lord Krishna says, when you are born again, you have meditated once in your life, you have helped one person, you have read one holy book, maybe in the past, previous life. When you are walking in front of San Francisco, you may feel like Vedanta society is a place where spiritual, let me go and attend it. The thought comes to you, Buddhism yoga, in your mind will connect with the previous samskaras, tendencies, that will prompt you to go forward again. Or you may go in the front of a church or any holy place, any tradition, any spiritual tradition for the matter. Or if you go to library, you find a wonderful spiritual book, let me read it. That taste comes because you have read some holy book, you have deposited some spiritual ideas in your mental system, sometime somewhere in the past. It's not lost. It's not like, you see, suppose you are preparing for Olympics, only one attempt, you will never become qualified. You go on practicing for years. So really speaking, that's why Vedanta is so open. And Vedanta gives you the confidence. Any day, any time you can start your spiritual life. There is nobody standing there to block your door, your path to spiritual truths. That is the uniqueness of Vedanta. Okay.
Thank you.
Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu. Those of you who may not be aware, but I want to remind you, we have a program on January the 27th, Sunday, Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary. So we will have formal worship at 10 a.m., then devotional singing at 11 a.m., and readings from the life and teachings of Swami Vivekananda. 27th, Sunday. You see, and then in February 1st, Friday, we'll begin our first session class in the old temple. You should enter the old temple from Filbert Street. That is the auditorium door. So that means every Friday from 7:30 to 8:30 there will be a regular scripture class in the old temple from February 1st, Friday onwards, evening 7:30. Okay, thank you.